All right, welcome to Cancer You Thriver. We are here with Mark Kelly, who's sharing his story. Mark is a 29-year cancer survivor. Mark attended Gordon College and was hired by ESPN as a researcher. During his 10-year career, Mark won 2 Emmy Awards. In 2008, Mark retired from ESPN due to the side effects of his cancer treatment. That year, Mark established CK Magic Sports, where he has produced and hosted over 130 podcasts. In 2019, Mark published a book titled My Scars Tell a Story, which details his cancer journey. Mark, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Andrea.
So take us back to the beginning and tell us when and where your cancer journey started.
Well, it started in September 1990 when I noticed a bump on my rear. I thought it was a hemorrhoid. And I just started taking medication at the time I had severe acne when I was younger. And I thought it may be a side effect of that because the drug I was taking called Accutane has a lot of side effects. I know pregnant women can't take it. It comes with, back then, a lot of people, that was your only choice for people who had bad acne. So.
And how old were you at this point?
I was 16.
Okay.
I was 16, yeah. And so I figured that, okay, just whenever the treatment for that will be over, it was like a 6-month supply that I had to take in order to take care of the issues I had with that. So I figured, if this is a side effect, so be it. But it kept getting bigger and bigger, and it started to affect more and more things I did. And being an athlete, and basketball season was starting, and I started noticing I was getting more and more tired throughout the practice. And I only played in 2 games before I was diagnosed. So those games I played okay, but I noticed I was getting tired. And I had asthma as a kid, so I was used to having breathing issues, but these were different types. This is a different type of tired. My whole body kind of felt exhausted.
And were you telling your parents about how you were feeling?
Well, my parents had their own issues. My mom and dad were divorcing, so there wasn't much, to say they didn't pay attention isn't true. I mean, my mom and dad were always kind of, care about, notice how I was feeling and everything. But it wasn't something that came up. I mean, you don't want your parents staring at your butt. So it would be something that would
Okay, that's a good point.
So, I remember one time telling my mom, and she said, well, have your father, and it's okay, Mom, I don't want to. I'll let the doctor worry about it. And even the doctor too was like, yeah, I don't really want to stare up your, So that was, it wasn't like somewhere where, oh, look at my back, oh, look at my arms. So it was a little different.
So how did it actually get diagnosed then?
How did I get diagnosed? Well, I had more and more pain going to the bathroom. And it was December 8th at this point. And I finally, after going to the bathroom in the morning, it usually would stop. It would sting for about maybe 20 minutes, and then it would stop. This time it didn't stop. And so my dad took me to the walk-in place. They diagnosed me with an abscess, and they said, they had a really good surgeon there. They said, okay, you have an abscess, and, we're going to admit you tomorrow. We'll probably won't even keep you overnight. It'll be a simple procedure, blah, blah, blah. So when I went in for surgery, that's kind of what I thought was going to happen. Then when I woke up in surgery, it was a little different.
So what happened when you woke up?
Well, I didn't know. I mean, you're kind of out of it at that point. So it wasn't until like the next day when I asked my mom what's going on. She said, well, because I thought I was still about to go home. And they said, no, they discovered it wasn't an abscess. They don't know exactly what it is. So they're testing it. And then it'll be a couple more days before you go home. But what they essentially did was they cut into a big tumor of blood vessels, which, I almost bled to death right there on the table. So they had to pack me with this paper, I remember. And when I had the paper removed, that was really, really uncomfortable. And I'm thinking, this is the worst thing I'm going to go through. But that was just the beginning. And then on December 12th, which was 2 days later, 2 days after I had the surgery, they came back and said, this is what it is. And they didn't tell me at the time that it was a rare terminal cancer. But that's what they told my parents. And they said, there's really not much we can do from here. We'll send you to Sloan Kettering or Manhattan. And at that point, they said, at best, we're dealing with 6 months for him. unless
What did they tell you specifically?
they told me we're just going to take you into the city and
Okay.
we're going to take you to the doctor and I mean I didn't even know it was cancer until I had to ask, and then how I
Wow.
found out was interesting because when the doctor came in and we were waiting, he said essentially the day before he said, when you go to the bathroom, you'll be able to go home, and I was happy I was able to go to the bathroom finally, and then I was when he came in, I told him I'm ready to go home, and he said, well, we're not going to send you home just yet. And then he asked my dad to talk to my dad, and they left the room. And then when they came back, you could see my father, who didn't hide his expressions well, was very distraught. But
Hmm.
he didn't tell me. And then he left at that point, and I guess at that point he went and he called my mom. And then my mom came, and then about an hour later, I finally wandered out of my hospital room because nobody had come back at that point. And I found them all like at the end of the hallway, and they were all like kind of crying in another
Ah.
room. And so I was the only one who wasn't upset because I didn't. What do I know? I don't know what I'm in for, So I just said, okay, well, this is what we got to do. We'll do it. And then before we went to the hospital, we actually stopped off at my high school, and I got to see a lot of my friends. So then they were like, I mean, you want to see people who faces got really white, and a lot of them probably the worst news they've ever heard at that point in their lives. So, they had just seen me a week before, had known me for all these years. I was friends with a lot of them, and now they think I'm going to die. So
But you didn't think you were going to die.
I didn't think so. No, I
Why
didn't
is
think so.
that?
I guess ignorance. Ignorance is bliss, they say, and it definitely was in that case. I didn't know much. I didn't know anything about cancer other than old people got it. I didn't know anything about chemo. This is why I think what we do is so important. I didn't have to know. I was a kid. At 16, you're not really a kid, but I can imagine what my parents were going through. They probably were in the same boat, maybe a little different. So for me, it was just, all I really wanted to do was, okay, I know I'm sick, but when can I play sports again? When can I see my girlfriend again? When can I do this again? And, I remember my doctor, who was very, Dr. Myers, and he was very doctory, I guess. Doctors at Sloan Kettering were either very cold and
Mm.
very, matter of fact, or they were insane. So, I mean insane meaning like the type of people you put in a room and they'll discover something very important, but you don't want them to socially be with you
You're
because
right.
they'll always say the wrong thing. Like that uncle who gets drunk at a Christmas party, and you're kind of don't let's keep him away from the children.
So
Because
not good social manners is
yeah,
what you're saying.
exactly, right,
Okay.
yeah. They had no social manners. They had no idea how to tell no bedside manner, none of that. Okay.
So what was your
I
doctor like?
Yeah, and so Dr. Myers, my first doctor, was like that, but he saw that I was a young kid, and he saw I was an athlete, and so I wanted to know when I could play again. He kind of switched the argument to, well, I'd be more concerned about some other things, but if you make it, I don't see any reason why you shouldn't play. Which at that point there was no reason to believe I was going to make it. So he was telling the truth. He just wasn't, telling me how dire the circumstances were. The good thing was that when after being there for about an hour, they got my results from the other hospital, and their doctors looked at it and they said, well, you guys misdiagnosed him. It's not terminal cancer. It's a rare form of cancer that's that usually doesn't happen in kids his age, mostly kids between the ages of 2 and 6. It's called rhabdomyosarcoma. And while that's not a much better diagnosis because it is a killer, we've had success with this different protocol that we've just started running with the people that we brought through this protocol. And that's what we're going to do for him. So, and the protocol was the thing was that they told me, they said, while the cancer certainly will kill you, this might kill you as well. So the treatment, because of how we're going to, how much chemotherapy we're going to give you, how aggressive we're going to be with this might kill you as well, but it's your only chance to survive.
So how did you feel hearing that though?
I didn't have a choice. And you'd be amazed what you can do when you don't have a choice. People say, well, you were a hero, or you had so much courage. And I'm a coward, basically. I mean, I didn't want to go through any of this. If I knew what was going to happen, I would have, so, I'm no way. But I didn't.
So you've alluded to that a couple of times. So I'd like to
Mhm.
dig a little bit deeper. So what happened? You said
What
several
happened?
times things happened. So so what was your worst moment?
There's too many to discuss, really. My worst moment. Okay, well, we'll start this way. When the thing that gave me hope, the first chemo treatment I had, my tumor shrunk about 75%.
Wow.
So it almost disappeared. And I remember telling my doctor, this thing's hardly, because the plan was for them to give me chemo, and then at the end of my chemo, the 6 or 7 doses that I would have, then they would operate and remove the tumor that was there. Well, the tumor was just about gone after the first treatment, and
Wow.
it was totally gone by the second treatment. And they couldn't find any trace of cancer in my body by February. So I was diagnosed and put in on December 12th, and by February I have no cancer in my body, because I had no cancer in my bone marrow or anything. They did this protocol as precautionary. And I remember when that happened, I said, because I've been religious too over my life, and they had a basketball game for me in February, to raise money because the costs were ridiculous. And someone came up to me and they gave me a note. And that note was kind of like everything I was praying for in that time, which was, God, just please take this, kind of like Jesus when he was at the Garden of Gethsemane, take this cup from me if you can.
Yeah.
So I was like, please, I just want to go back and play basketball. I want to, have the normal life of a 16-year-old. And so I was going to be 17 at that point. I turned 17 in March. That's what I was hoping for. And I saw that as, the note said, God is your doctor now. You are healed. Trust in God, and basically everything that the note said was what I was feeling. So I felt, oh, this is, God speaks through other people. I said, this is God's way of telling me to stop.
So did you feel like the treatment was done at that point?
Oh, I wanted to quit. I mean, I
Okay.
said, I am done. I said, because there's no more cancer in my body. I said,
Right.
what are we doing here? And I told my parents, and they didn't really know what to believe or what to think. I mean, they don't want me to suffer, but at the same time, they have to listen to, they are more wise than I. My mom said something, like, oh, go tell your doctors, and if your doctors say it's okay, then we'll be okay with it. Like what doctors are going to say it's okay? Like that I'm thinking at the time now, gee, why did I even have hope in any of that? Like, there's no way my doctors would have said, yeah, it's
So
okay.
your mom asked you to stand up to the doctor.
Well, she said, if this is what you were feeling, tell your doctors, and then if they say you can stop your treatment, you can stop your treatment. But she said, God wouldn't necessarily tell you that, because he gave these doctors to you, and he's the one who put these doctors in charge of you. And these are your governing authorities. These are the people you really need to listen to. And
let me ask you something before you tell us what happened next. Do you feel in that moment that you were healed?
yes.
I feel like the more patients that I speak to, many times they are so much more in tune with their bodies than doctors realize,
Mm-hmm.
no matter what their age. And it's frustrating to hear that doctors don't listen.
Well, yeah, I mean, but if they did listen, they would probably, and the person died, they would be sued probably anyway. So doctors are just on their own ass,
So you feel like you're healed. They can't find any trace of cancer in your body, but you still have more treatment. So what happens?
Oh, I still had the roughest part of treatment. I mean, I was just, and it's funny because after the second treatment, I almost died after the second treatment because I had the flu when I got my second treatment. Now, if you have chemotherapy, the chemotherapy itself is like getting the flu.
Right.
Well, have the flu when you get chemotherapy, it's like you can barely stand up. I couldn't stand up for about 2 weeks, and I had fevers of 103, 104, and I lost about 15 pounds in that week. Constantly throwing up, constantly. It was devastating, and I thought I was going to die. I really did. And they decided to give me an extra week off after that because it was so traumatic for me. Normally, see, back then too, cancer treatment was barbaric. Okay, like now it's not as bad. After I got my, when you get your initial dose, whether it's a 3 or 5 day treatment or even a 1 day treatment, your counts start to go down after about from the 7th to the 10th day.
Yeah.
And by the 14th day, that's when they should be at their lowest. So anytime you got a fever, you were susceptible to getting it in that point. And once you got a fever, you had to go back to the hospital and they had to admit you and you had to be on IV antibiotics. Now they have blood cell or white blood cells they can inject in you so your white count won't go down and you're able to fight off infection. Back then they didn't have any of that.
Right. Well, it won't go down as much as quickly, for sure.
Exactly, right.
So
my white count was 0.
What was the next step? So you said you had more treatments. What did they do?
Yeah, so then my doctor essentially told me, if you walk out of here, you might as well put a gun to your head and pull the trigger. And then it started to get really bad to where, and then my counts came back quickly, the first 2 chemos. And then March, I spent like 3 days at home. And I had lost a lot more weight. I became a lot weaker. And it took a lot longer for my counts to come back. But that's exactly what they wanted to do. Their whole point was to destroy me from being able to make bone marrow. And then they gave me back the bone marrow that they took from me. At the end of January, they took bone marrow from me because, again, there was no cancer cells in my bone marrow. And that was the bone marrow transplant I was going to have in July. And that's essentially what it was leading up to. And then the one good thing that did happen, though, that definitely helped me was they came out with a drug. I forget the name of it, but it stopped me from being sick. I wouldn't throw up as much.
Okay. So did you have that bone marrow transplant in the summer?
I did. I had it in January, in July.
Okay.
And then throughout the, me going through because you have to go, I had 4 weeks of radiation. That's really what did most of my damage, because that did a lot of damage to my intestines. And you don't know the damage radiation's doing to you until later. I had a big part in why I couldn't have children and a lot of other things that it destroyed in me that at that point, being 17 years old, you're not really thinking of. And you don't feel any of that when they give you radiation. Radiation is kind of, the worst part about radiation is when they're setting you up to get tested. And they have to put markers on you and they have to stuck a hose up my butt. And it's like, at that point, I'm at the same height I am now and about 115 pounds. I was laying down on a table that was rock hard and I felt every piece of that table. And so that stuff was kind of hard and all the testing to go through. And then when transplant started, transplant was just one big disaster after the other. Because of the radiation, my bladder wall ripped. So that my bladder started to hemorrhage. And they really should have taken my bladder out. But this guy, Dr. LaQuaglia, still had Sloan Kettering, one of the best doctors around, didn't take it out. He kept it in. But I had 11 bladder surgeries in the span of 3 weeks. And this is with no blood counts. Keep in mind, every time my mom saw me being wheeled into the emergency room, she thought that was the last time she was going to see me. I had sores up and down my throat to where I couldn't swallow for about a month, couldn't eat for about a month. And then I had my Broviac, which is what they put in you to put the chemo through, because they don't want to use all the veins in your arms because you only have so many. So so you don't get stuck every day. That became infected in August. Because of the time span of when I ate, they couldn't put me to sleep during the operation. So they had to operate on me when I was awake. I should have never survived. I prayed to die many nights, but God kept me alive.
Wow, I'm so sorry. In all of that, what was your best moment?
I guess my best moment was understanding the love God has for me as a person. At times like now, like going through something similar now, where you feel like there's just no hope, or you feel like there's so much that you're fighting that it's hard to see the end. If you've heard of the poem, The Footprints, this is kind of when God's carrying you. And it doesn't say in the Bible that God's going to stop any of these things from happening to us. It just promises that He'll never leave us. And that's essentially where you feel that connection with God. And if you read the Psalms, there's so many Psalms that David has written where he's really suffering, where he's really able to express how he feels. And I think that's kind of the way I felt at that point. So, it's just like, God, either have mercy on me, either destroy all my enemies, or just take me. What we don't see now is that when the smoke clears, you are that much stronger because you can only really build character through suffering. Physical suffering, mental suffering, they're different. You just what I pray is that I have the chance to help others with coming through what I'm going through now and what I went through then. So that to me is the joy, and that's the hope also of salvation, is that there's more to life than what we have here on earth, but there's also more what we can do here. God will be able to use what has happened to us to inspire and help other people that are suffering as well. And now I think that applies to so many people.
And so I just want to make a point for people watching this workshop in the future or listening to the podcast in the future, what Mark is referencing at the time of this recording, it's the end of May in 2020, and we've been going through the COVID-19 pandemic now for over 3 months. And Mark lives in New York, where it was by far worse than any other city in the U.S. And so that is what he is referring to. So I really appreciate that insight.
What in the world is happening? But there's a point to all this. You just don't know yet. You just pray that you'll be able to keep the perspective and understand, that things get better. You just can't quit. And that's the big thing. You can't give up.
Oh, I love that. Can't give up. So Mark, this happened to you when you were young. And what is one thing that you wish you had known at the beginning of that cancer journey?
I don't wish I knew, because then I wouldn't have done it.
Okay. I
don't wish I knew. I think there's a reason why, I didn't know. I do believe that knowledge for most people, when you're going through something, you need to have the ability to know what you're up against, how it's going to affect you, how it's going to affect your body. All those things probably would have been good for me to know. I don't know if they would have helped me, but it probably would have made me that much more fearful. Now I definitely need to know definite stuff and really, not just, well, I think this is what might happen, or you have to look out for this. I want to know details. So details for me are very important now where they weren't there, which is why I think this is what we do is very important, because it educates people on the choices you have. I would have liked to have the choice to have sperm frozen. And so where I would have been able to have a kid if I wanted to. Turns out that, later on in life, suffering from now Crohn's disease and lymphedema, there are other challenges that I faced that, it just didn't work out to where I would be a parent. And that's fine. I had given up that desire anyway. I think that those types of things, when you don't know them at first, maybe having the choice of, okay, if this might happen to you, this is how you can prepare for it. So if it does happen, you'll be able to still accomplish these things if you want to, or you'll still have the choice to do these things if you want to.
Yeah, so I have a question about that. When I was in my early 20s, I was diagnosed with Graves' disease. That almost killed me. And I had radiation for the Graves' disease to burn out my thyroid. And I had to sign a waiver saying that I understood that because I was taking radiation into my body that I might not be able to have children. It might make me infertile. I signed that waiver, but it was, kind of drilled into me, like, you understand the risk you're taking, but this is the only choice you have. So, but you were 16. Your parents were the ones speaking for you.
Yep.
Was that even discussed at all?
It was.
It was.
Nobody cared. At that point, it was, okay, well, if you die, what does it matter? We were much more concerned with me surviving. And I understood that. And look, my belief was, if God really wants me to have kids, I'll have kids. It don't matter what happens to me. God could do better than all that anyway. So, if there was something that really he wanted to use me for, it would happen. So that wasn't the biggest worry. But I do know that for those people who don't have those beliefs, that they need something that they can use too. Not everybody believes in God. Not everybody has that basis or that foundation. So for them, it's important that they have choices.
You have such an interesting journey, and you've had it for a long time. If there was only one thing you could do to improve healthcare in the U.S., only one thing, what would it be and why?
I would make drugs legal.
Make drugs legal. All drugs?
Yes.
But tell us why.
the war on drugs, I think, is something that has wasted so much money and has made millionaires of so many people that it shouldn't have. When something's illegal, you can then prosecute people for being criminals of something they're not really. Drug addiction is something that's very strong, that you don't make a lot of conscious right, wrong decisions when your mind is being affected especially by illegal drugs that they deem illegal now, that are going to affect you mentally. When they say, if you go into the hospital to have surgery and you get put on painkillers, like, I had no idea what painkillers were like before I had cancer. I never would have known. I never wanted to know. The worst thing they could have done is give me those painkillers, because then I knew there was a different form of a way of treating pain. Then I knew the Tylenol wasn't good enough. That there was, when I had sores so severe up and down my throat, I needed something that really worked. So once you give people that choice, it's hard to take it away if they get used to it. I know so many people that are going through side effects from when they had cancer or from surgery, that they've been deemed like bad people now because of this opioid crisis, and because of people taking advantage of that, and of essentially conning doctors to write out scripts for them. But it affects the people. I know so many people that are in real pain that get looked at like criminals when they walk into the pharmacy. That breaks my heart. So many people have made money off of illegal drugs, and that's created such a market where it should never be. If you wanted to end all the problems with drugs, I believe if you made drugs legal tomorrow, so much crime would be less. So much of people, taking drugs from the street that God knows what they're laced with, these people that are overdosing, a lot of those problems, I believe, would be fixed. And what I have to prove that is alcohol. Alcohol, when they made it illegal, it was just chaos. There was a point why they came back and they ended prohibition. Heroin and cocaine, those drugs I do believe need to be monitored. And I don't think that people should have access to them. But some of these other drugs, some of these low-level painkillers, some of these things that people are prescribed after surgery, having to worry about, I only have this amount left, or what am I going to do? Where am I going to get the script from? Those types of things, I think a lot of people do worry about. You could probably make those types of drugs legal and not run into many problems. I mean, you really have to overdose to kill yourself with those things. I mean, I've been on some form of painkillers for 25 years. So having taken it responsibly and everything, I know the benefits of it, but I've also known, it's because I'm careful and I know how to do it. There's so many people who aren't able to get that. Like now, if you need a script for something, it's so hard to get. Basically the government's made people who need it to look like they're doing something wrong. And that makes me very uncomfortable, because I know so many people that are suffering in pain because of that. Whether it's marijuana or whether it's, some of that. Look, and I know plenty of people that disagree with me, like really disagree with me. They think I'm crazy. I have a problem with somebody doing drugs and going out and driving, absolutely. But I have a problem with somebody going out and driving when they drink alcohol too. But I think in most cases, people want to just do it in the privacy of their own home, which then again, I don't have any problem with. People are going to do what they want to do. And to take that from them, I think creates more problems than it solves.
I really appreciate that insight, and I would have to look it up, but I think prescription drug overdoses, I think they outnumber illegal drugs in the U.S. now. Is
that because of that people are not taking them right, or because people are getting them from the street, or how is that?
Because people become typically addicted first because they're prescribed a drug, after surgery or for pain, and then of course, people are numbing emotional pain with that drug.
Absolutely.
And so I'm the daughter of a prescription addict, and my mother was a nurse. Easy access, especially at a time where it just wasn't monitored at all. I mean, I didn't understand as a kid that it wasn't normal for a nurse to come home and empty her pockets, and there would be pills and alcohol pads and syringes and vials, and I didn't understand that wasn't normal. I mean, our cabinets look like a pharmacy. I didn't know any different, right?
Yeah.
And my mother was very high functioning for a long period of time until she wasn't.
To me, you're better off not being prescribed it. You shouldn't prescribe these drugs to people who you don't have a real background of their information and all that stuff. Because of all the stuff I'd gone through when I was sick, I had been on major IV drugs, so to me, it wasn't any type of new feeling or anything I wasn't aware of. For other people, if you're going to prescribe them that, they got to know the risks, and that none of that I think created this big problem was really understood. You had so many of these drug companies that were just in it to make money, and that's where a lot of these problems started. But now you have this big issue on their hands, and there are people who do need it that are being affected. Those are the people I really care about. So I just believe there's a better way to do it. I think you can monitor it that way, where you're not creating criminals, and you're still allowing people to make choices that aren't going to hurt them or other people, as much as what this war on drugs supposedly that'll never ever end, and there'll never be any. I don't care what they say, there'll never be any way to really overcome it, because as long as you have illegal drugs, you're going to have people that can make money off of illegal drugs.
I don't think your point of view is as unpopular as you think it is. I'll be curious to hear how people respond, but I don't think it is, really.
So I'm not saying my way is necessarily the best way, but I do think it's a way where you can control a lot of the things that are getting out of control. You can give back to control.
All right. Are you ready for our Thriver rapid fire questions?
Sure.
Okay. Beach, desert, or mountains?
Beach.
Beach Boys, Beatles, or Rolling Stones?
Rolling Stones.
What is one word that best describes you?
Persistent.
Okay. Before you die, the last song you want to hear?
What's the name of it? It was a guy who saw his wife and kids drown, and then he was in the boat, and the captain told him where this is where you're not the wife survived, but the kids drowned.
I'm terrible with song titles. I'm the wrong person to ask. Who's the singer?
Well, it's a hymn.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not How Great Thou Art. All is well. It is well. It is well. It is well with my soul. Yeah.
It is well with my soul. Okay, I'm going to have to look that up.
Yeah, the story behind it's amazing. Between a real guy that owned businesses in Chicago, lost all his businesses in a fire of Chicago. Then him and his family were to take a vacation going to Europe. And on the boat, he was supposed to go with his family on the boat, and then he got called back to business to Chicago, so he sent his wife and kids ahead of them. Then the boat sank, and he got a wire from his wife saying survived alone. So she survived, and I think one of the kids survived. And then he had to go back and get on the boat and go over where his wife and kids were over in England. And when he was going over the part that they drowned in, the captain said, "This is where the accident was," and that's when he wrote the song.
Oh my goodness! Wow. Okay, last meal you want to eat?
Something with meat, like steak.
Okay. Last person you want to see?
Look, there are a number of people, and that would be unfair, I think, to so many people that I do love. There would be a number of people that I would want to see before I die.
But very diplomatic.
These are the people I want to see when I get to heaven.
Last words that you will speak.
Last words that, geez, these are tough. Last words that I will speak. Did the Jets win?
I love it. Just spoken like a true a sports person from New York. Okay, aside from Cancer U, what is one resource that you would recommend for cancer patients?
There aren't many, which is why I think this is so important. There are a lot of places that I think, you know as well as I do, that this is a really hard business to be in, because so many are in it for profit. I believe that chemotherapy and radiation that they still make, they should not make. And there's so much money in it. I think people get greedy and don't even care really about the damage they do to people for chemotherapy or radiation, which to me are two. When you put poison into somebody's body, there's got to be a better way to treat than that. And I've seen the damage that does, and that makes me really angry. And the fact that it's still going on and that radiation is still an acceptable form of treatment really bothers me. And because I know people are benefiting from it, and that pisses me off. There's other ways to treat this disease that they need to focus on. They can end this disease if they want to. So much of it is wrapped around in money. Again, I'm not a conspiracy guy. I just know how the world works. that to me is something that when I'm considering where to go for my information, I have to know. And I would tell people to be wary of is to always get a second opinion, always understand where, the background of the person who's giving you the information and what's motivating them.
Wow, that's great advice. I feel like I say always get a second opinion every day. I feel
Hmm.
like I'm always saying that.
Oh yeah,
Um,
there are so many people that are out there that lie straight to your face and don't care and are in it for themselves, and they don't give a hoot about what you do or anything. But then there are people who aren't. So you're going to run into plenty of good people, plenty of bad people. You just, hopefully people will be able to discernment. I think is very important. Something I'm not as good at.
Discernment.
So
That's a great word too.
yeah.
That's a good word. Okay, so you wrote a book. Tell people how they can find your book.
My book is available if you go to my website, CK Magic Sports. It's what I created about 2015. I started it, and I started to do podcasting and stuff. That's where they can find my book, which finally was able to get it published in 2019. And
Okay, and give us
yeah,
that URL again. We'll put it in the show notes too, but what's the URL for the website?
ckmagicsports.com, and then
Okay.
it'll be on.
Mark, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with our community.
Thank you. But there's one more thing I know you had said you wanted to ask, which I think is very important, is what my 16-year-old self would say to my 45-year-old self, or actually was it
What
vice versa?
advice,
Yeah.
knowing what you know now, what advice would you, yeah, please,
Um,
what advice would you give to your
yeah.
year old
Now,
self?
the funny thing is that the final chapter of my book is I write a note
Really?
for
Oh, I
my,
love it.
at that time, 44-year-old self to my 16-year-old self. And basically, it describes how much I miss that body and how much I miss
Mm,
the things I could do physically.
mm,
And it was so different. Being an athlete, there were so many natural things that I had taken from me that really break my heart. And still, when I think about it, I'll get upset because there were so many things that were so easy for me to do that I couldn't do anymore. Survivors, that's a great word because you really are surviving. Sometimes you do need to find a way, or you need more help because you're not able to do these things yourself. And that's what's most frustrating for me, is because I'm someone who wants to do things themselves and doesn't want to rely on anybody else. And I think that's a really horrible feeling to have, is when you feel like you're a burden and then other people have to help in order for you to survive. I would like to see more of attention put on survivors that are permanently damaged from this treatment, because I'm one of them. And I think that, and I'm trying real hard to provide for myself, but there's just certain things you can't control. I would like to see more options for those people, more plans for them to either don't have money donated or have them be able to accept money or whatever it is, and provide a service as well, because it's not enough to just get something. If you're not providing something back, you feel cheated. I know for myself, the best I feel is when I feel like I'm doing something to earn what I'm doing. Whether it's just talking to somebody or giving them advice or just being there for somebody, or it could be just whatever God blessed you with that you're talented at that you can now do online and do it this amount of time that will be able to not affect some of the things that you can't control. So
thank you again for sharing. We really appreciate it.
thank you, Andrea.